Why is opera, one of the highest forms of musical genres, maintaining its popularity for several centuries now? How should one properly listen to opera in order to develop an appreciation for this art form? During the 17th century in Europe, opera held a unique and cherished status as aristocratic entertainment. Opera houses doubled as social hubs and recreational spaces for the elite. Opera-goers eagerly anticipated a grand and multifaceted spectacle, akin to the contemporary fervor surrounding events like the Super Bowl, where packed stadiums are the norm. It wasn't until the mid-19th century, following the introduction of gas street lighting in cities, that the option to spend an evening at a café instead of the theatre became feasible.
Opera exists at the intersection of numerous art forms and belongs to the highest musical genres. An opera performance is an artistic synthesis where music, words, acting skills, and stage design converge. Set designs, costumes, and the dramaturgy in opera are essential elements of the genre. The audience immediately recognizes the three-dimensional stage embodiment and spectacle.
Nevertheless, the paramount role in opera is unquestionably attributed to the music. Even in contemporary times, it remains customary to use the phrase, "listen to opera," even when referring to attending a live theatre performance. The orchestra serves as the foundation for the drama, with the music effectively conveying the emotional ambiance and fostering empathy among the audience towards the characters. The music is the key to unraveling the opera's intricate structure, facilitating our ability to distinguish between protagonists and antagonists, between the forces of good and evil. It's no surprise that the composer Asafiev once commented on the profoundly enigmatic nature of opera as an art form. Music clarifies that the events in opera are not devoid of rationality. Rather, they unfold according to distinct artistic conventions. Music elucidates and vividly illustrates the manner in which artistic time progresses during the performance. In the world of opera, it's not uncommon for a character to halt and sing when faced with mortal peril, a scenario that might appear illogical in our everyday lives, but signifies the suspension of artistic time within the genre. Whenever an aria or ensemble is performed, we are transported into an alternative artistic realm, where time flows in a manner distinct from our reality.
All down to watch a movie, it's the storyline that predominantly engages us. The allure of intrigue and suspense keeps us hooked, as we eagerly await the unfolding of events and the eventual resolution. It's worth noting that movie scripts frequently draw inspiration from books and various source materials.
For opera, the equivalent of a screenplay is known as the libretto. The libretto encapsulates the lyrical epic, narrative essence of the opera, and it's where strong traditions have evolved. The author of the libretto also draws upon source material, but when crafting the libretto, the source material is typically significantly condensed. On one hand, the number of characters is reduced, and secondary plot lines are trimmed away. What remains is the central conflict and its continuous development. On the other hand, this compression provides the characters with more room for self-expression and reflection on the stage. This is why time in opera has the capacity to freeze or stand still. Opera lives by its own rules, where the plot takes a secondary role. Suspense and action can even be absent altogether.
Verdi. Rigoletto. In a heart-wrenching scene, Rigoletto opens the sack, only to find his dying daughter inside. In her final moments, she expresses her willingness to sacrifice herself. This tragic twist takes place as Rigoletto, the court jester, believed he was seeking revenge. Verdi's opera Rigoletto weaves a dramatic narrative where love ultimately results in a murder. Tragedy is an ever-present element in opera. The emotions and actions of its characters are pushed to the utmost extreme, reaching a boiling point. If it's love, it leads to death by love. If it's jealousy, it results in murder. If it's wounded honor, it ends in death. It's a means of redemption from disgrace. Indeed, death shows up at every turn in opera. Stories of stabbings, suicides, and tuberculosis have run through libretti since the beginning. What is it in opera that continually entices a multitude of onstage fatalities? And what is it about opera-goers that keeps us returning for these experiences? Attending the opera means anticipating heartbreak, as the art form practically delivers spoilers by design. We often peruse synopses before the curtain rises, or encounter timeless tales with numerous retellings. By efficiently resolving plot details, operas gain the artistic liberty to focus on emotional narratives, musically building up to these demises in various ways. Death in opera can serve as liberation, condemnation, a moment of catharsis, or a solitary act, occasionally embodying all these elements simultaneously. So why does opera has a historic fascination with death? The aesthetic complexity of opera can be explained by its origins.
Origins of the music drama is traced to Italy, Florence of 17th century, the era of Renaissance. A singular prod was given to Florentine humanism by sponsorship of Cosimo de' Medici, a banker so wealthy that he financed the kings and countries. Renaissance humanism is presented as cultural and educational ideal, with an emphasis on imitatio in order to absorb the spirit of ancient culture. Florentine humanism came to see classical ethics as consistent with Catholic beliefs and as a more effective way to inculcating moral virtue. Classical rhetoric was ethically edifying, and thus the rebirth of classical drama was expected to serve the same purpose. So-called corsi camerata was a kind of informal academy, salon in the late Renaissance in Florentine, a group of amateurs, astrologers, philosophers, musicians and scientists who met informally under the aegis of Bardi and Corsi. The group is often regarded as the birthplace of opera, is a title its members would scarcely have foreseen for themselves in their time. Their aim was to reform the polyphonic music of the day, and they believed that the best way to do so was to renovate the ancient Greek practice of setting words to music with power to move the passion of the mind. They didn't consider themselves as innovating, but reviving the earlier and better way.
Poet Rinuccini and composer Piri were part of the Camerata, and it was this talented duo who in 1600 composed the first opera that has survived the test of time, Eurydice. While there were mentions of an opera called Daphne before, there are no extant records of this work. Therefore, it is Rinuccini and Piri who are credited with creating the opera Eurydice. In their preface to Eurydice, they appealed to the opinion of many that the ancient Greeks and Romans sang their tragedies throughout the stage. They explained why they believed the ancients must have sung their plays in a manner something like Piri's recitativo. They were inspired to undertake practical experiments with monadic songs and recitative based on two ideas circulating among the learned elite of Florence, that ancient tragedies had been sung throughout, and that ancient music had been so affecting because the Greeks had not written polyphony but relied on simple yet expressive melodies. They imitated the passions, whose pitch and rhythm produced a powerful sympathetic response in the souls of audiences. To announce the genre of their work, they chose tragedy herself to sing the prologue. Greek mythology is the setting for many of our cultural touchstones. There are at least 14 major operas that are based on themes and personages from Greek mythology and its glittering history. Aristotle concludes by suggesting that different genres produce different kinds of pleasure. The pleasure of the epic lies in its episodic, diverting story, while the more intense and higher in terms of social value pleasure produced by the epic is catharsis, the mysterious purging of our emotions of pity and fear when we witness the unfolding of a tragedy. Opera Midi, by Luigi Cherubini. Opera's origins are deeply rooted in tragedy, with a primary influence from ancient Greek myths and tragedies. Consequently, many operas are based on well-known stories from mythology, making the plots familiar to the audience. This means that opera often lacks the element of suspense, as we generally know the story beforehand. However, if you're unfamiliar with the plot, it's advisable to read a brief summary in advance. This is particularly important for two reasons. First, operas are often performed in foreign languages, and comprehension can be challenging. Second, even if the opera is in your native language, librettos provide concise versions of the story, which might lead to confusion without prior knowledge. Additionally, in opera, multiple singers may perform simultaneously, making it difficult to discern the lyrics. This complexity stems from the central role of music in opera.
So what is opera? Profound love, devastating heartbreak, unbridled happiness, and uncontrollable fury. The orchestra, the vocals, and the performances will stir your soul. Opera, a genre with a history spanning 4 centuries, has engaged artists worldwide. No matter if you're a fan of live music, an admirer of visual art, a history enthusiast, a closet singer, a dedicated binge watcher, a socialite, a bookworm, a fashion aficionado, a storyteller, an athlete, or anything in between, opera offers something for everyone to relish. You can be part of it.